If you've ever watched a movie where someone does magic mushrooms, you've probably seen them look something like this, or this, or this, or even this. Looks kind of fun, right? Even though it's definitely super illegal. But what if that wasn't just the start of a wild adventure? What if that was the start of curing their anxiety or curing their depression? Because right now, multiple companies are racing to get their psychedelics, the ones found in magic mushrooms, approved by the FDA. This isn't just in movies, this is in real life. Top analysts have looked at the science, they've looked at the finances, and they agree that 2026 could finally be the tipping point for getting magic mushrooms-based treatments into your local pharmacy. So today we're going to break down that science, the data, and the very real obstacles that are still standing in the way. What's up, nerds? The idea of getting psychedelics approved for use as a medicine is definitely not new. Practically an entire generation of musicians and artists have been begging for it for like 60 years now. But in the past, there hadn't been convincing enough clinical trial data. But the start of 2026 has seen several very significant advancements over the old way of making these psychedelic treatments. For example, on February 17th, 2026, pharma company Compass Pathways reported some impressively sick nasty data from their ongoing phase 3 clinical trial. They're trying to combat treatment-resistant depression, or TRD, using their drug called COMP005, which is just the fancy pharma name for psilocybin, one of the main components in magic mushrooms. This makes it the first phase 3 clinical trial for a classic psychedelic. And their initial data was so good that not only did Compass's share price jump by 50%, but all other share prices of other psychedelic companies also jumped, anywhere from 5 to 15%. One clinical trial readout literally brought up all the homies. But they're not the only ones. Definium has 3 different phase 3 clinical trial readouts expected to come later this year. And they're using LSD to treat anxiety and depression. Sorry, where are my manners? LSD is acid. If you feel a little bit weird about these types of drugs coming to the clinic, you're not alone. Less than 2 years ago, a company called Lykos Therapeutics was apparently this close to getting MDMA approved to treat PTSD. Yes, that type of MDMA. During their clinical trial, they saw significantly reduced PTSD, but the FDA still rejected it because there was a catch. The trial could not be double-blinded. The patients knew what treatment they were getting because they were kind of tripping balls, but the FDA still believed in the potential for using psychedelics in psychiatric disorders. That specific trial just had a bad design. It was a methodology issue, not a science issue. What exactly are these two companies doing differently? Well, lucky for you, we're gonna break it down scientifically. Let's start with this little cutie here, psilocybin. One of the best understood compounds in magic mushrooms. Certain liver enzymes turn the inactive psilocybin into the active, actually useful molecule, psilocin. It's psilocin that goes into your brain and actually does the dirty work. Psilocin goes to your brain and hits what's called serotonin 5-HT2A receptors. So by acting like one of the happy guy neurotransmitters, serotonin, psilocin is able to increase brain activity. But here's where things get interesting. Your brain has this thing called the default mode network, or DMN. Think of it as your brain's autopilot, where the cockpit takes up large regions of both the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. The DMN is more active the more that you're ruminating or reflecting, maybe a little too much, about certain negative thoughts. Like that really embarrassing thing you said to your crush back in 2008. In people with depression, the DMN gets stuck. It's way too active. And like a plane that's not cleared to land, it just circles these negative and intrusive thoughts over and over and over and over. Psilocybin and psilocin create a landing pad. Remember how psilocin mimics serotonin, one of those happy guy neurotransmitters? Well, in people with depression, it does so in parts of the brain outside of the DMN. And a few things happen here. Overall brain activity increases, as does neuroplasticity. So neurons that previously weren't talking are now connected and interacting with each other. This increase in good brain function starts to dampen the negative ones caused by the DMN. The negative thoughts caused by the DMN that were once raging like a storm don't seem so loud anymore. This is fundamentally different to how traditional antidepressants work. These SSRIs, your Zolofts, your Prozacs, they just increase serotonin levels across the board, including the DMN. It'd be like raising the volume on everything. But psilocybin and psilocin, they're more like adding a bass booster, a little more targeted. And that's why Compass Pathways is putting their synthetic psilocybin analog through 2 ongoing phase 3 clinical trials. And they're going big, looking at 826 patients with TRD. These are patients with depression who have already tried 2 different antidepressants, but they still haven't worked. Psilocybin is their last line of treatment. And I'm not shitting you when this newest data readout has the pharma world foaming at the mouth. Patients are given either a high 25 milligram dose of psilocybin, a low, or a no dose. Their depression symptoms are then rated using the industry standard Montgomery-Åsberg Depression Rating Scale, or MATRS. Basically, the lower the number, the lower the depression symptoms. Patients saw an immediate improvement the day after their first psilocybin treatment. Not super surprising, the movies told us this would happen. What's most impressive is that the patients who took a 25 milligram dose of psilocybin saw a 3.8 point reduction in MATRS score compared to a much lower 1 milligram dose. But this effect keeps going. Compared to a placebo, 39% of patients maintained a statistically lower MATRS score for 6 more weeks, while 25% saw this benefit through up to 26 weeks, all with just 2 total doses. Let that sink in for a second. These are patients who have spent years trying to find the right treatment to combat their depressive symptoms. But now there's a good, statistically significant chance that just 1 or 2 doses of this type of psilocybin can make their symptoms better for months. Okay, so then what's the problem? Why isn't this stuff already on the shelves and then immediately flying off of them? Firstly, these are still ongoing clinical trials. This isn't the full data package with all of the patients tested. It's just like a little checkpoint. Compass still needs to collect the rest of their data from all of their patients, do their diligence in filing the necessary documents to the FDA. Then the FDA needs some time for a formal review and blah, 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 blah. Compass is expecting their formal submission to the FDA in the second half of 2026. But even if the FDA says yes, there is unfortunately a whole slew of other challenges. The truth is that COMP006, the name of their version of psilocybin, isn't actually that easy to administer. You can't just give people magic mushrooms to take home and have them pop them like bombs while they watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine. In this clinical trial, for example, patients had to go to certain clinics with healthcare professionals trained on this study and monitored in a controlled environment for at least 6 hours. If that's how it needs to be administered in the real world outside of the confines of this trial, that's a huge infrastructure challenge that just doesn't exist for most other drugs. Now, there's a little bit of hope here, as a recently FDA-approved juggernaut called Spravato requires 2 hours of monitoring post-treatment. There are fewer concerns with Spravato because it's ketamine based. I know, pharma's wild, but at least there's that precedent in the market leader needing some amount of post-treatment monitoring time. And Spravato needs to be administered 5 to 10 times more often than psilocybin, so psilocybin could actually be less strenuous. The second main obstacle is the DEA. Under the Drug Enforcement Administration, psilocybin is currently listed as a Schedule 1, a drug or substance that doesn't have any current medical use. The same category as things like heroin. Even after FDA approval, the DEA will need to reschedule psilocybin so that it's cleared for public use. And countries all around the world will have to do the same. And if you've ever had to deal with healthcare administration, you know that this is neither quick nor easy. Now, the third roadblock is that the FDA will almost certainly need a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy. Basically, these extra social guardrails on top of those session problems that we talked about earlier. Not to mention that insurance companies need to figure out how much and when they can cover certain parts of this treatment. All of this culminates in just more paperwork, more bureaucracy, more money, and more time until it gets to market. And finally, the part that scares me the most, the FDA uncertainty. If you've been around this channel for a while, you're probably so sick of me talking about this. Even though they say that they're super excited for the science of psychedelics and for them to get approved, you can't trust a damn thing they say. In this last year in particular, they have spent so much time telling companies one thing, but then as soon as their application hits the FDA's desk, they reject it immediately. Well, you just really never know. Now, since you asked really nicely, here's my honest take. I don't want to get too excited, but the clinical data looks great so far, especially since it's being used in a patient population that has run out of options. Pharma is saying, hey, start with the tried and true methods, and then use this as your last line of defense. And so far, the safety profile looks really good. Very few people are reporting adverse events. But I think the thing I'm most excited for is to see how this sets the tone for future psychedelics. You'll see this a lot in big pharma, where it really just takes one approval to get the ball rolling, to demystify any of those concerns that people were having. It's one of those things where a lot of Western companies and healthcare systems are very risk averse, which is good, but they haven't found that way to balance risk benefit at a speed that companies in China, for example, can do. If you want to see another video of just how much faster China can innovate in a clinical trial setting, you can click on one of these over here. What do you think? Think the world is finally ready to adopt a legal version of magic mushrooms, or are there certain concerns that haven't really been addressed? Let me know down below. That's all for me today. Thank you all for stopping by, and we'll see you later, nerds.